3 years work with, Professor John Westburnham. He's got a lovely book called Rethinking Educational Leadership. And in it, he summarizes for me collaboration as this. It's learning from one another, learning with one another, and then the critical piece for me is learning on behalf of each other. What about the people who can't be here today? Are you learning on behalf of them? And will you connect with them after this meeting? Because connectivity is often the thing that we are pressurized about, aren't we? We don't have time, or do we? But if we're committed as a PLC to have the sense of moral purpose and core values, we need to hold fast to that. And this is something for all our community. I can't define how it's going to be used, but that's the spirit that we work in. I've been doing some work recently with someone called Dean Fink. Many of you perhaps have come across Stoll and Fink. It's about learning and it's about time. I hosted him for 10 days before I came out here. I'm fascinated in doing some work with him and Andy Hargreaves on the area of sustainability and succession planning. We have a big issue in England. People are not stepping forward to become head teachers. You may have got a little sense why, but there is also something called the demographic time bomb. You know, the baby boomers are retiring and people are not coming forward, and we're massaging figures. Instead of, so imagine if we had 4 school vacancies within a geographical area, we're making one appointment called an executive head. So it looks like we've covered 4 schools when actually we've made one appointment across a collective. And governors are panicking about this because sometimes we'll get under 5 people applying for a headship. Yeah. And if we re-advertise, do we do it again? Or do we grab somebody and take the best? And then we've got to unpick that one, haven't we? A bad appointment takes too long to unpick. And think of the damage it does with the young people. Now with Dean Fink, I'm doing some interesting work on trust. In a system, trust is a very important issue. A lot of the communities I'm working with, groups like yours, develop trust, confidence in one another, but the system doesn't always trust them. Dean's fascinated in how the English system is somewhere in here, low trust zone and intrusive with Ofsted. In fact, some people are feeling quite paranoid about it all. How I can be building communities like yours in this area of high trust. So my question to you, how are you establishing confidence in one another through the competence of what you do to ensure high trust is in this room? Because it's critical. And I'm getting fragmented groups coming to me because of the system. We have something called academies. You can go out of the system by choice, or if you fail, you go out. So there's a bit of a dilemma there, isn't it? Do I stay or do I go? But then you can go out on your own terms if you're outstanding. And it is often felt that if we close a school and re-badge it, it's once failed, it now becomes a great success. It's still down to the quality of leadership and teaching, whatever you call the school. It's a fundamental. And so here's this balance of conditional trust and verification. How much do you trust people and how much do you verify? Or do you have something called blind trust, where it's just over to you and watch out for the consequences? So I'm doing some work around that. And maybe, Phil, we could just capture this little one that looks at the whole area of trust and verification, please. Canal Plus, that's it. Thank you. Trust and verify. Thanks, Phil. Some of the examples I give, I hope that you may well wish to continue the conversation as I go. I mean, that's my invitation to you. It may not be appropriate, but I'd be delighted to put you in connection with some of the networks that are trying to get to the heart of some of these issues, and it is an open invitation. I can do no more than that. So I've mentioned the word of connectivity. 2002, a group of England principals came to Victoria. They met with Peter Elliard and Brian Caldwell, and they started to look at this whole concept of what would be a preferred future. We looked at probables and possibles and preferred. And we started to create something called an accord for teaching and learning. I had a group of primary, special and secondary school head teachers who came. And they suddenly realized that despite the difference in phase, they were all galvanized around learning. And so what they committed to do was, 10 years ago, build this almost contract for mutual support around teaching and learning. It actually revolutionized that authority in terms of its thinking. The 10 spread across the schools. Why? Because they agreed to profile their learning. They created, okay, it was nothing grand, but a synopsis. They actually profiled their learning. I got alongside them because they were a little apprehensive, because as soon in England as you say, hey, I'm pretty good at this, somebody goes behind and says, yes, but you're not so good at those things. So I stood alongside them. So where is your learning profiled for others? And actually, the feedback I got was this: Tom, that's one of the most significant pieces of work we've read. And I said, why is it? And they said, because it was produced by one of us. Supported practice. What are we doing about the profiling of that? For people who are not round this table, for the, yes, sometimes the majority who just don't have time. Are we going to be viewed as a little elite who just get on and do most things, or are we going to really put down some markers around things that matter most to us? That was really significant. And I got Louise Stoll to come along and start, do you know, to have 12 secondary head teachers within the room putting up on a wall against 6 national standards what they were good at and what they weren't good at was a revolution. They still talk about it. It was the catalyst for change because they built confidence in one another and they were starting to get high levels of trust in a highly competitive market. It can be done. It can be done. You won't see it probably, but I've got a slide of this one. Here's a lovely piece that I've come across in terms of making that word change happen. The elements in terms of vision and values, the building of skills, and I'm delighted to see that happens within your program. This isn't just knowledge, it's skills based as well. How can I develop the skills and crafts of doing this? The incentive isn't money. It's often the thing that's the stumbling block. Phil mentioned the PLC that we created in South Gloucestershire, and he had a key role in this, a really super role. It wasn't just me and the authority. I had practitioners who were to become the leaders when the authority lost its central numbers and resource. Does that happen? It happens in England. We're getting local authorities going. The district is no more. So where is the potential power for development? And I use power in a constructive way, not in a negative way. And what we did here was to look at the incentive is self-sustaining learning communities. And we built that, wrong name now, it was called the South Gloucestershire Leadership Academy. I wouldn't use the word academy, it has other connotations. Let's call it a PLC. It was built for the people, by the people. It received Beacon status, that's national award, and people used to come and say, Tom, take me to your leadership centre. And I said, we haven't got one. And their faces hit the ground. Why not? No, because it's wherever the people come together. Okay, so what funding do you receive annually? We don't. You mean you don't receive funding? I couldn't build it on funding alone because it was vulnerable. We have things called financial constraints in England. We have things like diminishing resources. So it is now still surviving. It may have gone into a different form, but it was self-sustaining. And that is a really important issue, okay? Why? Because the spirit of it was right. People believed in it. If you've got that central belief, possibilities open. So that's what I mean by incentives. Resources, of course, we mentioned. Action planning, that's critical. You've got to have a plan. The plan that you create as that dynamic form for raising performance and improvement and how you can identify it, and you can look at some of the things that don't happen. If you take out vision and values, you get confusion. I won't go through them all, but maybe you can look at those in a little more detail later. Here's a lovely piece that I saw in a South African school, almost quite naturally, from Nelson Mandela. A vision without action is just a dream. Action without vision just passes the time. Action with vision can change the world. Wonderful. There's a piece in a book called Schools and Communities by John Westburnham, George Otero from New Mexico, and Maggie Farah. And they talk about the power of professional dialogue. Now, I won't get it right, but I'll try and remember it. And it says, real change begins when two people come together to have a conversation about something they care about. They talk to other people because they care, and the word spreads and the world can begin to change. That's the power of professional dialogue. And I think sometimes we don't maybe always have enough time put aside for that. And the second part this morning, there will be very much time for you to do that, to help inform my thinking and development, as well as, I hope, giving you some ideas for change. But that's a lovely piece from Mandela. The Department for Education, as it was once called, did a piece in 1999 that Sir Ken Robinson fronted, called All Our Futures. And it was around a beautiful word called creativity. It's a thing that seems to be lacking in our leadership planning at the moment. We are being constrained rather than being a little bit more politically savvy. Dean Fink calls it political acumen, and being creative. Can you still be creative within your system? If there are enough gaps appearing, are you going for them and constructing things that are of meaning, that always come back to outcomes for pupils and students and make a difference? They all involve thinking or behaving imaginatively. These are the processes. Where's your imaginative thinking? I'm still trying to hold on to that with some of our English leaders, but with feet on the ground. One head teacher said, I see creativity as feet on the ground and head in the clouds. I've met too many people who've had their head in the clouds and their feet aren't anywhere to be found, and they're vulnerable. And that's often what people in authority look at when you have groups like this. Oh, you've gone off on one of those blue sky days, have you? Or it's lots of woolly conversation, but nothing ever gets done. It's called cynical thinking. But actually, we've got to be savvy, haven't we? And know what that cynic might say, but produce evidence that shows the worth and value of it. Don't be vulnerable in not having the outcomes. Overall, this imaginative activity is purposeful. The purpose is around building leadership capacity, trying to develop middle leaders, trying to help student capacities grow. These processes must generate something original. Where's the original thinking coming from? The outcomes must be of value in relation to the objective. So this is back to the action plan. And remember what Ofsted's saying, let's not have a massive tone. Let's keep it short, succinct and precise, and really go for it, so that people understand exactly what it means. So I don't like reading them normally, but I'll do that for you. I don't know if you've come across this Chinese bamboo. When you plant it, nothing happens in the first year, nor in the second year, or the third or fourth years. You don't even see a single green shoot, and yet in the fifth year, in the space of just 6 weeks, the bamboo will grow 9 feet high. The question is, did it grow 9 feet in 6 weeks or in 5 years? Some interesting work I've been doing with Louise Stoll on cultural shift. It takes, on average, 4 to 5 years to shift a culture. It's not an overnight fix. And yet our system expects results yesterday. Not overnight, yesterday. That's a real dynamic. They can't get time alone. They can try to create time and space collectively. And that's where you come then to external validation, helping one another. Is the picture coming around the essence of having effective professional learning communities rather than working alone? But cultural shift takes time. There's some lovely work. Andy Hargreaves talks about slow leading and slow learning as being positive but not negative. It's often misconstrued in our country because you're asking for time means you're just lazy and you don't want to be bothered to do it. No, I think that's a lovely piece there. It sometimes really does take an inordinate amount of time, but we are not being given that with legislative procedures. I've been looking at a book recently by Howard Gardner, 5 Minds for the Future. If you get a chance, have a look at it. I went to it because I was a little bit down. We were talking about not having national standards for head teachers. We were talking about occupational requirements. It was a bit clinical for me. I thought we were entering into a health profession, not an education service. And so I went to this book, and Howard Gardner talks not only about these 5 minds, but also about the crafts of leading. The crafts of leading. What a lovely phrase. What are your crafts of leading? But he identifies 5 minds. One, I think, right at the top here to me is really important. It's called a synthesizing mind. That's one of the things that I found one of the hardest professional challenges as a head teacher was that people thought I was doing nothing when actually I was synthesizing it. And there are certain bits that not everybody in the community will know or hear, because that's my job, and it's professional and it's personal and it's confidential, and they're thinking, when is Tom going to do something? I'm thinking it through. I'm putting the pieces together. You know, there aren't that many incidents that demand a quick action, except maybe this one. I was working with a group of Saudi principals about a month ago, and they were talking around this whole dynamic of coercive leadership, you know, get in there and tell people what to do, or more democratic. Let's have a meeting or a conversation. And I said, look, if we've got a fire in this school, we're not going to have a meeting about it. We're going to get out. We've got set procedures, out we go. 2 days later, we were high in the second floor of Worcester University, and guess what went off? The fire alarm. And they looked at me and said, Mr. Tom, is this? I said, we go. It happened to be a practice, but it was just that sort of thing that, yes, sometimes there's immediate decisions. But actually, a lot of the time you're doing this. You're weighing it up, putting the pieces together. That's a high order. But with it comes the challenge that people are going to think you're doing nothing. A disciplined mind doesn't mean autocratic, it means organized. Let's be disciplined about this. That's why I think, you know, when you get a PLC, you've got to be disciplined and savvy around the legislation and what we're going to do. We're going to do this bit, we can manage that with our resource, right, there's the outcome. A creating mind, obvious, as I've mentioned earlier on, back to all our futures. Creativity. A respectful mind, A respectful mind, particularly, say, in communities like this, where somebody's going to give you a view that you think, hold on a minute, let's respect it, let's talk it through, not dismiss it. That's the deepening strength. John West-Burnham calls it shallow, deep, profound learning communities. Are we shallow and superficial and appear to be okay, and then something blows in that might contest that? And an ethical mind. There's a lovely definition there by Senge on a professional learning community. It's a place where people continually expand their capacity to create the results they truly desire. What are the results you truly desire? Have you got them written large? Have you shared them? Do we all go out this room feeling them? Where new and expansive patterns of thinking are nurtured. Hey, that's good. Let's identify a time for nurturing, expansive thinking. Oh, it might seem a little bit ambitious and twee, but let's go for it. Where collective aspirations are set free. Notice how the geese are flying. They fly in a formation. That's the strength of a professional learning community too. You know that, don't you? They're 70-75% more effective in terms of power generation when they fly like that. What's the formation of your PLC? Sometimes X will lead, sometimes B will come to the front, sometimes C will hoot and get a little tired. Is he or she just left to fall by the wayside? Or do we target somebody to get along and say, hey, what's the matter? You okay? Can I help? And we reform in that. Phil, do you mind just helping with this one, please? I think we're probably on the language. Change your words. Change your words. I am blind, please help. It's a beautiful day and I can't see it. Just change the words. Powerful, absolutely powerful. The significance of language, and particularly once you put it into print. Yeah, and that's what I'm encouraging learning community to be really clear about, a shared and understood language. And particularly when it is then, thanks Phil, I'm sorry, you see this, we're going through a phonetic forest at the moment in the UK, and we're testing 6-year-olds to read phonetically. And there was a pass mark put in of 32, I think, out of 40. And many of the outstanding schools were scoring under 32. I think they're reviewing the whole target now because, you know, young people who are very able readers were suddenly finding some of these words were just nonsense. I used to be a primary school teacher, and this was actually printed in a TES. But again, I'm sorry, you may not see it, but we'll come back to that later. Here, I represent this sort of part of our conversation. We're drawing to a close in a minute, around a 3-pillared bridge and a stream. In England, we have in the stream, and it looks remarkably calm. But as one of my ex-advisors said when I was in my first headship in rural Cambridgeshire, Tom, beware of the submarine underneath the water. It's never calm in education. There are 4 words: standards, markets. We're in a highly market-driven economy. We really are. Without districts and local authorities, private concerns are coming in, offering you the world, charging the earth and going. Accountability, high levels of accountability, absolutely. And then this is the one we often miss, pedagogy. And yet that should be, I think, right up at the heart there. So we have the 3 pillars are the system, the organisation and the individual. And here, as the head of the organisation, are you, making sense of the politics that are here and the practice that is there. Because sometimes you might feel politicians make decisions that are not based on practice. Policy shift. How are we, through our professional learning communities, bringing the practice into the domain of the politicians? That's a big challenge. Can it make a difference? We have nothing to lose. Trends begin when groups of like-minded people come together around the same theme. It's just that in England they've been fragmented. There's a movement now to try and help arrest this. A lovely piece there from René Dunal. What is above knows what is below, but what is below does not know what is above unless you climb the mountain. I'm not saying this is easy, but if you're up for it, it's a beautiful view up there when you've got something that is rich, self-sustaining, and makes a difference. We'll stop for a break in a moment, but there's just 1 or 2 more, if I may. Please. Thanks, Phil. We're going for the La Boucle. Let's not move at too fast a pace in technology. Here we are. Okay, much to think about, and I think is it okay if we have a break now and then maybe come back to some more thinking afterwards?